user dependency, right? If the end users do not apply the right labels, the DLP tools can't catch it. We can only do so much centrally in terms of and templates and keywords. So we definitely, there's a lot of dependency on end user skilling to make sure that the owner of the data applies the right labels. Secondly, when we share data outside, for legitimate reasons, beyond that we have no control. We can put controls within our organization, or we cannot put controls on a third party once it leaves our organization. So how do we secure that? Then we are also seeing too many entry and exit points. It's not just about email and endpoints today. We right now we are in Teams, and we can accidentally share sensitive data on the chat window, or users. There are users who actually intentionally share sensitive data with other third parties using these new exit channels like Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, etc. So how do we handle all these new ways of communication and collaboration with the outside world? The other thing that we're also seeing is that we may have classification in place, but given that there are so many different apps and services and ways of working, classification may not always be unified across these various portals. So like that, there are many challenges, right? Unmanaged devices, monitoring behavior, risky user behavior, non-compliant behavior, which the DLPs of yesterday cannot cope up with. And that is what is going to be a challenge for us as the way we work has changed and will continue to change in the near future. The DLP approach requires change. So I'm going to be talking today in terms of what this change should be and what is Microsoft doing to enable and facilitate that change, right? So that's the key problem that we're looking to solve and discuss about today. So there are three big themes that basically, you see how to address this problem. First, of course, is identifying what is the sensitive data that I have and where is it residing, and just getting the whole visibility about that, right? So identifying the sensitive data is critical and where it resides. Second aspect of it is, once I've identified, then making sure I have all the guardrails to prevent that from unauthorized use, whether it is external user, whether it is internal user, whether it is across apps, different web services, cloud services, or unmanaged devices, etc. Right? So identifications of sensitive data and then preventing sensitive data from being leaked out. And the third key element that we are also talking about is saying, before even a user actually does something which they're not supposed to do with the data, how do I get some early warning signals? How do I identify which users are at risk, which users are demonstrating non-compliant behaviors, or which functions are more vulnerable to being compromised, so that I can be more proactive. Given the amount of technology we have, given the amount of tools we have, I think this is not a nice to have. This can really be like, hey, I really need to know this. I need to be able to really take my data management and data security the program to a next level, to be more proactive in identifying risk, notifying the right stakeholders, and then making sure I put in the guardrails to prevent that from happening. So those are the key themes that are evolving in order to address the problems that I was speaking about earlier, right? And if you look at what is Microsoft doing, Microsoft is also following that approach. And we are building these capabilities in our data protection stack. And a lot of this is already available to you. So you may say that it's good to know, but does this require any additional investment? Or can I get started with what I already have? And most of you, are already users of Microsoft, whether it's Office 365 or your applications that you have like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, or on your Azure service. So I'm going to talk to you about what is already you can do, how you can take these three broad themes, and then how do you really get to the next level and next phases of implementing these three themes. Okay. So firstly, three things, right? One is, how do we help you identify and protect sensitive data? Second, how do you make sure we help you implement data loss prevention controls across the estate, so that no matter what channel of communication, there is always a control to prevent that from happening. And third, how do we help you manage insider risk? Identify risky behaviors, non-compliant behaviors, address that early so that you're identifying and being more proactive before an actual event, right? So these are the three pillars that I'm going to be talking about. So firstly, in terms of and labeling sensitive data, Microsoft tools are kind of getting into the next level of data discovery, classification, and templatization using various approaches. We've all been familiar with the template approach where you have standard templates for credit cards, standard templates for PII data, standard templates for a set of documents. But now what Microsoft has done or is making available is more like machine learning kind of technology. So for example, if you have a customized document, you can freeze that, you can give that sample document to the Microsoft classification engine, and it can understand this document is very custom to my organization, and any document or any file that matches this format is sensitive for my organization. So you can create your own what do you say, learning models for sensitive type of data that is there. Of course, there are various built-in libraries, sensitive information types. You have different types of entities out there. You can do data patcher, data pattern and other matching available. But I think the whole idea about ability to train the tool and tell it what is sensitive to in your environment is something that is really, really interesting, and something that is really exciting to look forward to. So basically what this helps you do is helps you tell the system what information is critical for my organization, and then allow it to go and run and scan and crawl your environments across on-prem and cloud apps, and to figure out what all data type matches this, these classifications that you have mentioned, and then apply the right labels for that, so that it can help you in discovering sensitive data and applying the right labels right before you even implement protection policies in place. So that is something that is available today for a lot of customers based on the license type and the subscription type you have. And of course, the labeling type, there are 4 default labels. You can always have your own customized labels and policies around that. And I'll show you a demo in a minute about how this works intuitively without any user intervention, how you can use the whole concept of auto classification, auto labeling, and auto protection available within the Microsoft applications of Office 365 to protect this sensitive data and leverage these inherent capabilities to address the problem where we are dependent on users to identify and protect sensitive data out there, right? So this whole platform is called the Microsoft Information Protection Platform. It's a unified platform wherein even if it's an on-prem system or it's a cloud system or it's applications like Team, SharePoint, Power BI or Exchange, or on the other side you have your databases, systems, or even third-party systems. This kind of integrates with all of those applications and devices to give you a unified data discovery and labeling kind of an experience so that you identify and protect the right level of data. Okay. I just want to show you a quick demo of how this works, and then we can keep bringing your questions on the chat, and answer it when we open it up again. But let me just show you how this kind of this works in terms of the real world. Yeah. Right. So what you see on the right is a standard document. I have pasted some content on the right out there. It's in white. And on the left, I have a document which actually has the sensitive, engine, the sensitive labeling engine, data type engine already pre-built into the system. So 2 different systems, one with the auto detection and labeling system, the other one just without any intelligence out there. Now, on the left-hand side, as the user starts creating this, creating documents and trying to save it, because it has detected a sensitive information, it will automatically apply the confidentiality labeling that has been designed for that kind of a document. The user will not be allowed to save the document unless they use that kind of a labeling, right? This is just one basic example of how it works, but you can create your own scenarios across Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and data analytics platform. And I'll show you, one of the other business BI reports, in the example out here. So on the left, it is automatic, detects sensitivity type, applies the label, does not allow the user to save the document without that label. Whereas on the right hand side, you can just save the document and the user does not get prompted at all. Right? So that is one the one way of looking at it. Right? And then as a user also wants to kind of convert this document into a PDF file, the same experience continues even there. So PDFs inherit the protection, inherit the labeling type in this example and demo that is being shown on the side of the system. And you can see there it says document protected with the label confidential intent, internal. So even if the user tries to save the document and wants to share it in some other format, the label follows. Whereas on the right-hand side, the same as a user without this functionality does it, can save it. There is no label, inheritance that is happening. And the system continues to have sensitive data without the right labeling, which basically puts it, a lot of dependency on the end user out there, right? So that is just one example of how this whole, auto labeling, sensitive detection, and classification type works. Now, another example on your screen that I'm showing you is of, a business report that is being downloaded from the internal business analytical tools like Power BI. Now, in many a times, we use a lot of sensitive information is hosted on the internal business analytical tools. And when users download these reports, they are downloaded in Excel templates and formats. Guess what? Is already integrated with the information classification and detection system will detect that and prevent the user from carrying out any further action, right? So that's another example of how the data labeling experience is not just restricted to one user application, but flows from one type of file to various other services that an organization has. So this is to create that seamless experience of detection, discovery, and applying protection at the source to make sure that your sensitive data is always carrying the right set of labels, right? So that is one thing, one of the examples of how Microsoft is working with our clients to build that visibility, that level of understanding of the sensitive information type, and then applying the right kind of labels. Once you have the right kind of labels, then how do you make sure that those labels are detected and you have a unified policy across your various channels? And this is the second thing that product teams have built, basically end-to-end data protection stack. So not just email, not just endpoint, but your biggest channel of communication today is Microsoft Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive. So how do you have these kinds of data policies or controls which identify the sensitive data and labels that you have created, and then uniformly apply that policy across all the various sources of data sharing, data storage, and then data exchange that happens, without really having to have duplicate or redundant policies out there. So again, creating a unified, so you apply the policy at one, create the policy at one level, it gets applied to all the different data repositories that you have, again giving you a seamless user experience, data leakage prevention policy experience, and makes it easy for data administrators to maintain and manage that, right? So one is creating and identifying sensitive data, and then applying the right policies to protect the sensitive data across different layers and channels within your system out there, right? And again, I'm just showing you some screenshots of the Microsoft data protection platform. What you see here is how you can create one policy, and you can just with the click of a button decide where all do you want to apply. What you see is Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, endpoint devices, your cloud applications, on-prem repositories. I also have the Power BI window out here. So if this Power BI use, I can apply it at the Power BI level and application as well. And if there are third-party cloud applications like Box or Salesforce or G Suite here, I can even monitor and extend that policies to those data repositories and storage systems as well. So that's one of the again examples of how not only identifying sensitive data, but applying protection and preventing data from being leaked out. Now, what you see on the screen again here is an example of Teams, how this works in Microsoft Teams. So, for example, I created the policy earlier on our sensitive data type and applied it on Microsoft Teams. And as we know today, a lot of information gets exchanged on Microsoft Teams. One of the biggest data leakage or data, I would say, both accidental and intentional data leakage way is Microsoft Teams. So here is another example of how we built this DLP functionality where you can use the inherent detection capabilities of Teams to detect and block sensitive data, file, chat, etc. on an
Hey, Darren,
application
sorry
like
to
way of
interrupt.
looking at it. Yes, because
Your video gets choppy in between, so maybe you can stop the video and then you can turn it back towards the end.
sure, I can do that.
Awesome. Let's do that.
Thank you. Okay, so again, I spoke about the triangle approach that Microsoft is taking. So identifying sensitive data and then helping you detect it with the right set of labels, and then preventing that kind of data from being leaked out across the organization, across different sources. Now, the third thing that is very, very interesting in today's time is how do you get early visibility? We've created the right set of programs, but you want to identify, just like we do phishing simulations, right? To identify risky users and risky behaviors. How do we identify those users and risks early in our environment that are prone to data theft and data leakage situations or simulations? So that's another interesting module that the Microsoft product team has built within the Microsoft framework. So what you see here, I'm just putting an example of how this tool works. So this solution is called Insider Risk Management. It basically looks at the Microsoft 365 graph and all the APIs that we have integrated together. It supports Microsoft platform, also integrates with the non-Microsoft systems, and I'll explain in a minute which other third-party systems it supports. But basically, it gets just like we do event monitoring. This system has the capability of looking at the user behavior with the sensitive data type behavior that we have defined and identified in the previous two themes of conversations that I spoke about. And it maintains that historical view of that user. So at any given point in time, you can proactively go and say, okay, which are the users that are seeming to be high risk, or you can have an event, like example, an employee submits a resignation that can trigger a workbook right into the system and say, hey, this user just resigned, submitted his or her resignation. Can you just look at his or her behavior over the last 90 days to see if there's anything that looks suspicious that we need to take action of, right? So this system has the ability to look at historical data, identify anomalies that the user has triggered with respect to their behavior with sensitive data, and then create a policy, create an alert. And at the same time, it will continue to monitor what the user behavior is during his or her notice period. And for example, here are some examples, right? So it can go back in time and look at what the user has done. So in this case, the user was accessing the OneDrive before they submitted their resignation. They downloaded a lot of files. Out of those 170 files that they downloaded, 50 files had confidential labels onto it. Some of it were related to financial data, some of it were related to PII data, right? And just some time back, this was 6 days ago, again, just 2 hours back, there was another download of 50 files done from so and so project, different projects. The user renamed that file, the user emailed it to some personal ID. In certain cases, the user also tried to downgrade the label so that it does not trigger an alert. So you get this, all this information is captured in this system and it can trigger early warning signs of what that user behavior is, and help you be more proactive in kind of detecting. So this is slightly different than DLP because this predominantly looks at the user behavior with respect to data, right? And there are very different, a lot of other different signals that it looks at. So this is more on a constant basis, learning, relearning, baselining the user behavior, looking at different contexts. So one context I mentioned to you is somebody, giving in their resignation. Other context could be, hey, this user is a senior executive, and we need to just have enough guardrails to make sure that this user, when he or she is dealing with sensitive data, is not having any maybe unintentional, accidentally sharing or putting company's data at risk, right? And at the same time, when we're looking at the user context, we're also looking at what is the user doing. Is there an intention of taking out sensitive data, like deletion of files, right? Cleanup activity, or copying it to an external file or folder, downgrading of labels. So looking at not just the user, context, but the activity intent, and then comparing it to their peers. So now this is different than what our traditional DLP tools can do, because this is something that DLP can't see. DLP can only see a 0 or 1 situation. There is a file, there is an action, it matches the policy, and I term that as sensitive. But it does not give you this kind of richness saying, hey, there are users, who are doing activities that are looking as high risk. He or she may not have acted upon it, but there is something going wrong, and I need to kind of go and investigate, right? So that is what this kind of system gives you the ability to look at user behavior, user context, and also behavior with respect to the peers to identify such kind of risky behaviors earlier in the life cycle of dealing with sensitive data, right? And there, this system also takes into consideration the various activities, like what you're seeing on the screen here is two users doing the exact same level of activity, but coming out at a two different risk level. So for example, there is a user who's sharing, unusually high volume of sensitive information on Teams. She's trying to print some files that are labeled as confidential, and she gets blocked. She gives a valid justification. Her intention is to actually get the work done. It's not a risky behavior. She gets the approvals in place, and then gets going in terms of emailing the file to a PR agency after getting the right justification. So that's a behavior. It gets flagged off as high risk, but then with the right justification gets approved. Whereas at the same user trying to do the same activity is again detected. That user has submitted a resignation. He has tried to print confidential files, in the recent past, trying to copy data into a CSV, trying to downgrade labels, the files that have sensitivity labels. So a lot of red flags, right? And then, trying to then start again emailing files to external ID. So while there might be some things that are common, it starts off as very identical patterns. But looking at other activity type, it really puts this specific user at a very high risk, and goes ahead in terms of blocking the user or the access to the data, and not allowing this user to override the systems, right? So this is another example of what an insider risk management solution or framework can do in terms of giving you early visibility into behavior of high risk and non-compliance activities. Now, one is that the way the user deals with data, but many a times it's not just about data. It's also about how a user communicates within the organization, in terms of things like, is there signs of harassment? Is there signs of inappropriate behavior? Is there sign of discrimination in the way the user is communicating within the organization on various channels? Not just Teams could be one, email could be the other, various other forms of communication, right? So this system also looks at not just what the user is doing with data, but the tone and the communication type, or the way the user is communicating, and what is it that indicating about that specific users. Again, this helps you to identify high risk behaviors from an HR standpoint, from a culture standpoint. These are things that organizations want to know today, saying that are there employees who are misbehaving? Are there employees who are really, creating a very hostile environment within the organization, or even things like insider trading kind of an activity, right? So are there users who are doing things which are not in compliance with the company's policy, culture, and expected, behaviors, and identifying those users earlier in the system. And as you can see, this has nothing to do with DLP and data leak, but this is again in terms of what can you do and how much you can build on top of these signals that are already available out there, right? So putting this, all of these things together, it basically helps you create a very, different way of dealing with users and how users are handling data in the way we work today, right? So this is where Microsoft is working towards building controls, building systems to enable our organizations. Many organizations already have a lot of this today. It's just that they don't know that the capabilities exist, and we need to work with them to turn this on. But this is out there, right? So identifying sensitive data intuitively without user dependency, right? Then protecting it across different layers of channels that you have, and using early warning systems, behavior analysis, signals to identify users that could be high risk or could be non-compliant with the company's policies and frameworks, and put the organization at risk, right? So those are the key capabilities or key, I would say, ideas and approaches that are now coming into the enterprise compared to the traditional DLP kind of control, right? So I would just like to kind of summarize my talk today and then open it up for questions and discussions and say, gone are the days where DLP was good enough. I think in the times that we are today and the way we work has changed. The future of data, securing data has changed. So there is a strong need for auto labeling, auto classification of sensitive data. You can't depend on the end user. You have to build in that controls where data is getting created. At the same time, you need to put in controls to protect data, no matter if it's lying within your organization or it is lying outside your organization. So using a combination of data protection tools and rights management tools, protecting data wherever it flows, right? And then covering all existing and new paths, right? Teams, for example, again, as I said, like example today, I missed talking about that example. We are talking about on Teams, and if there is some sensitive information that I am sharing on the screen, there is nothing that stops you from taking a print screen and using it for other purposes. But there is a functionality that we are building where when I'm projecting sensitive data and you're looking at sensitive data, you see a watermark with your name on your screen. So when you press the print screen button, that data you get a snippet of the data, but it has a watermark of your username or your email ID that you have used to sign in. So it always that who has taken a print screen gets this timestamp on this. So again, an example of how things are evolving with the way we work and building security controls around protecting data in this new way of working, right? And then last day they said, don't wait for the actual event. This requires a different approach. So detect, ability to predict and then prevent risky, non-compliant behaviors early is the way forward. So DLP was great at some point in time, but now the entire approach is changing, and we need to evolve with the change and be ready for the future, right? So that's what we are hearing, what we are seeing, and what we are working on at Microsoft and with our clients like yourself. And really happy to follow up and take a look at what all you're doing today, what all do you have from the Microsoft estate, what all can be implemented immediately based on the profile and subscriptions that you have. And then if there are any other additional subscriptions that you need or capabilities that you need, put a plan in place to have that deployed in your environment, right? So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention and open it up for questions.